Hey guys, so I wanted to create this video because I had a comment on another video where I was showcasing uh, one of these Max for Life devices that you can create using Scribbletune. So these Max for Life devices are available on maxforlife.com. You can take it from there. So the comment was more about how this device works. So there are two devices. Since I recently made an update to the devices, it's seen on the home page here. But by the time you get to this video, maybe it's still not on the home page. It might be somewhere within the site. I'll be sure to share the links right in the description of this video. So this is the page for that Riff device. Here's the device screenshot. So this screenshot is kind of blown up over here. But once you download the device and put it in Ableton Live, it's not going to look this big. So maybe I can just start from the screenshot itself. So the screenshot is about version 1.2 of Riff. I do have an article on my website, scribbletune.com, about how to do this Riff with just JavaScript, where I create this method and then you can use that method to generate patterns like this, and we'll go over patterns as well quickly. But before that, this article kind of shows you how to do all of this with just JavaScript, and this is the entire script. It's not such a big script, it's just this much, and it generates the riff, and then you're supposed to use the MIDI file. This is very good because you don't have to be limited by the UI. Whatever the UI, the functionality provides, you're not limited by that. You can write your own script and kind of make your own pattern generators and whatnot. But then if you don't write JavaScript, this can be a bit of a hurdle. Hence, I created a Max for Life device that does the same thing. So if you're using Ableton Live, you can download this Max for Life device and you can directly use it in your project. So this thing is called Riff and it's at version 1.2 as part of this video. However, I've already made some progress and I think at 1.4. This screenshot is from the earlier version. However, the functionality is the same, so it hasn't changed much. I'll be adding more improvements as time goes by. But at the moment, this is what we have. On the right here is the pattern language. And the pattern language is very intrinsic to Scribbletune. So if we go to clip and then pattern, we can see that it's a very short language. As you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 characters. X stands for a note on event. So it's like a step sequencer, if you will. X stands for enabling a step, and the minus stands for note off or disabling a step. The underscore, this is an underscore. The underscore sustains a note. So if you had setup X, which means note on, or enable a step in a step sequencer, then that underscore will extend the duration of that note. By default, a note is a quarter note, and if you extend it with a single underscore like this, it'll just double it. So a quarter note will become a half note. If you put an X and if you follow that with 3 underscores, now that is going to make that quarter note into a whole note, and so on. Conversely, these square braces allow you to subdivide a note. So if you had a quarter note and you used X for that, but let's say you wanted to, let's go to like I mentioned, X is a note on event and minus is a note off event. So if you made a combination of these, you presumably have a pattern going over here like this. Note on, note off, followed by note on, and the rest of it. So if you put 1X, it means a quarter note, and you can by all means change that setting. So if you go back to the screenshot, by default, the note is quarter note. You can click this arrow button. Since this is a screenshot, it won't open up, but when we go to Ableton Live, we'll be able to see that. Basically, this is a drop down, and when you click this arrow, you'll see an option for selecting the default quarter note. So from quarter note, you can make it to a half note or an 8th note or a 16th note or even a whole note, for that matter, entire measure or 2 as well. Coming back to the pattern language, putting an X by default will enable a quarter note. If I put an underscore next to it, now this whole thing is a half note. If I put 2 of these, this is a whole note. Conversely, if I put a square brace and then put 2 of these within it, what this now means is this X, since it is inside these square braces, has become 2 8 notes instead of 1 quarter note. So this is not a quarter note anymore. each X is now an 8th note because it's within this square braces. If I put square braces within square braces like this, now this entire square brace is a square brace within another square brace, which means the inner X's, these two X's inside here, will now be 16th note each. And this can go on. You know what I mean? So this sort of a thing you cannot do in a UI very easily. I've seen some probability devices where they do have some clicking and doing something to create this sort of intricacy in the pattern, but I find that very clunky. Finally, I want to come to the R character. R stands for random. In case you have selected U scale like this over here, which it is by default, what the R, the random, implies is it will use a random note from the scale that you have selected. So in this case, the root is A and the octave is 3, and the scale is Aeolian, which is minor scale. So for the A minor scale on the third octave, it is going to select a random note from that scale wherever you have R. This R will be substituted with a random note from the A minor scale if it was to be generated from here. And each of these X's is going to be the root note. So in this case, it's going to be A3, A on the third octave, each of these X's. If this was not selected, if U scale was not selected, then this random will randomly decide a step on or off for that particular step. So let's say if I have something like this, R is repeated 4 times over here. So what that means is when it's putting together the MIDI file for this together, it is going to do a dice, if you will. It's going to randomly decide if I want to do a step on or off at this point, on or off at this point, on or off at this point, and then the same here. So this way you can quickly put together random on-off events, and then to make it interesting, you can just repeat that. So whatever that you set over here in this repeat, that many times this will get repeated. By default it is 1, but you can set it to 4. If you set it to 4, what it will do is it will convert this to this. Or for that matter, if you put an X minus X R, let's say this was your pattern, and you selected 4 in this repeat, it's going to convert it to, so this way you can have a small pattern which is repeated a bunch of times to create some interesting rhythm. And of course you can use the subdivide with the square braces to create some intricate rhythms. One thing before I go on, you could even just use 3 of these, let's say like this, and you can have polyrhythms going on quite easily. I could do something like this. These are 5 characters, right? And the pattern language is right here on the device as well. So if you get stuck somewhere while you're typing out these patterns, you can just refer to this. This generate button, right? What it does is as soon as you make some change and you hit generate, or even if you don't make any change and you have these bunch of R's going on over here, the generate will just create another pattern and randomly choose some notes for this R section over here. Having said that, any change you make in the device will auto generate. I'll probably add some switch over here that lets you turn that off, because what is going to happen is if you have some clip selected and you make some change over here, it is going to override that clip, and sometimes you may not want that. So one thing to do is to kind of duplicate clips or create new clips and write riffs within those new clips, or the other thing is you can just do undo. So whatever riffs this component generates, you can undo and go back to the previous one in case you overwrote one accidentally. Okay, now there are a couple of more things and then we can go to the demo. So this AB part is a common terminology that is used within music. So you have a A part and then you have a B part, and then you can combine that A and B part in various ways. So this dropdown provides a preset combination of A and B parts. It also introduces a C part in certain cases, like it has done over here. So what that would mean is if you have this pattern and let's say it is repeated only one time, which means it looks exactly like this, Scribbletune will create a clip in Ableton Live with the X set to the root note that you've set over here and the R set to a random note from the scale that you set here, assuming you have selected U scale. So then it will create such a pattern, and for A it will use that pattern. For the repeated A, it will use that same pattern again. For B, it will create a new pattern, but it will use the same combination of X and R and the hyphen, and the same for the root and the scale. And for C, it will do one step further. It will create a new pattern out of the same pattern and same scale, but this time it will omit the first note of this Aeolian scale. So what that means is, if the A minor scale is A, B, C, D, E, F, G and A again, then for clip A and for clip B, there will be a chance that you might get the A note again, because R is going to randomly pick a note out of the A minor scale, which means it could very well pick the first note as well, which is the A3 from this setting. But what C will do is, it will only select B onwards. So the second note onwards, whatever scale that you have over here, it is going to select a note randomly from the second note onwards. It's going to omit the first note. So the reason for sharing this information is that you can choose to use a C combination only if you really want to omit the A note out of it, the root note out of it. I hope that makes sense. And during the demo, this will become a bit more evident how this works. I think I already covered note length. Note length is the default duration of X. It is a quarter note by default, but you can change that. Sizzle is for adding some amount of variation on the velocity of each of these notes. So by default, these notes are, the velocity of each notes, or the volume of each notes is set to 100. So in MIDI, all the values are between 0 and 127, right? So 127 being the max and the 0 being the least. By default, the volume of each note in Riff or in Scribbletune for that matter is 100. What Sizzle does is, it lets you create a pattern of volumes. So in this case, it's a sine. So it will let you create a sine wave out of the volumes. And then you can repeat those as well. This part is still a bit clunky, but you can play with it a bit and see if it gives you interesting results. Okay, I think I've covered everything over here. Now we can move to the demo. So first things first, I'm going to download Riff. So I'll download device. It's gone into my downloads folder. Now I'll go to Ableton Live. Here I have a small project set up. I have a channel for drawing my riffs. This has a VST plugin called Hive. It's by Yuhi and it's pretty nice. I've just taken some preset. Okay. And then I have a group channel which has a kick, a bass, and a hats and snare loop. So the kick is just a single hit on every quarter note. And the bass is and both kick and the bass are using Serum as the VST plugin for driving their sound. I'm using a basic, so this patch is created by me, but it was created by watching a video from this guy called Tron. He has some really nice tutorials on YouTube. I forget the name of the channel that he has, but he has a ton of good content, and I kind of followed his tutorial for the psytrance bass sound, and I kind of like it, so I kind of use that. And this is a regular kick again from Serum, but using one of Tron's tutorials for creating this sound. So yeah, so that's all I have, and I have this other MIDI clip over here that is driving stutter edit on the group channel. So if you play it right now, it sounds something like this. Yeah, it's pretty basic, but it should be fine for what we are trying to demo over here. Since we've already downloaded Scribbletune, let's take it from the downloads folder and put it on the bass channel. So here's Scribbletune, and the first step is to create a clip. So this is an empty clip that I just created. A clip needs to be selected for Scribbletune to work. This is very important. So if you're not seeing any results, the first thing would be to do is to make sure that you've selected a clip, and then you hit generate. Now if I double click it, as you can see, it has drawn something out. it's from the C Lydian scale. So there are a bunch of scales available through Scribbletune, but here it is using C Lydian on the second octave. So as some of you might know, the way MIDI works in Ableton Live is whatever MIDI that you set externally or from some plugin or whatever, it is going to go one octave lower than that. That's because the way Ableton Live treats middle C. And I've written an article elsewhere about what that means. I'll share a link to that article in the description of this video. But for now, we can just suffice it to say that whatever octave that you set is going to go one octave lower than that. So here it's C2, right? So if you see this, it's created it in C1. And the default pattern is this over here. So I just deleted it so that I can just start demoing a little bit of the pattern. So I've just put a single X over here and hit generate. Actually, I don't even need to hit generate. Anytime I make a change, it reflects in here. So at the moment, I just selected a single X, but you can see that it has printed out, it has created 4 notes. So there are 3 X's, 1, 2, 3, and then there's this D note over here. If I click it again and go back, you'll see it has done the same thing again. I select it, generate again, go back, again it's the same thing. So nothing has changed. So what is going on? So this AB part is default set to AABC. So as I had mentioned earlier, whenever there is a C, it skips the first letter of the scale. Since U scale is set over here, it is using scale, and for that scale, and in this case, the scale is C Lydian, and it is skipping that first note from that C Lydian. Maybe this is getting too complicated, so I'm just going to make it to A. So just a part. Now if I generate and I select this, you'll see only one note is selected, and that's exactly what we set up from here. If I select 2 of these, there are 2 X's in here now, and I do generate, you can see 2 X's selected here. Now if I change this to a C and do generate, what do you think will happen over here? It has these 2 C and 2 D notes. Why are there 2? Because it's A and C. So one pattern for A and another pattern for C. So total 4. There are 2 characters, right? So they're going to be 4. And since we used C, it is using the second note of the scale and not the first one. Now if we play that out, let's just play it out. Right? Now what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to put a R over here instead of an X. So what that means is the first note will be from the note that we set over here, and the R will be any note from this scale. And let's just change the scale to maybe Phrygian dominant, because this seems to be like a psytrance kind of sound, and it's very easy to kind of relate to the Phrygian scale when we are working with psytrance. So I change the scale to Phrygian dominant, and then I'm just using the simple pattern. Whenever I click generate, it's just going to create a new pattern. As you can see, this has created this pattern where we have a C note, a C sharp note, and a G sharp note. If I go back and make sure that the clip is selected and do generate, and go back again to the clip, you can see it has changed a little bit. It has selected now C, G, C sharp, and G sharp. If I play that out, so what I'm going to do is, I'm going to hit play over here, and I'm going to keep generating different patterns. So there is a very common technique in psytrance music where you let the machine generate some stuff and you record that over time and then just select the good parts out. So you can do something similar with Scribbletune as well. You can have this organized chaos, if you will, going on, and then you can record that and use the best parts later. There is a guarantee of having a good part more often than not with this approach than simply putting a randomizer on the bass channel, because there are some really nice MIDI effects also from Scribbletune. There are some nice MIDI effects from Ableton as well, like the random and scale and velocity and whatnot, arpeggiator. But this approach creates a slightly different style of MIDI clips, and you may find something more interesting faster. So let's just hit play over here and then keep playing around with this generate. And since I mentioned that you can keep this thing running and keep playing around in this space over here, you could record the whole thing on the side and then choose stuff that you like. So to demonstrate that a bit, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit play and I'm going to kind of play around with the settings over here for a bit, and let's see how that sounds. So I think I'm happy with that. So whatever that we've generated so far, we could have done more, but I'm going to stick to this because I want to move on to the next part where I want to actually create a riff. So this was the bassline, right? The video was not for creating basslines. The video was for creating riffs. So let's go over here and create this clip, an empty clip, and then obviously drag in Riff, the device, onto this channel. By default, it has this pattern and it is set to Lydian. So I'm going to just change that to, since we use Phrygian dominant, I'm going to use Phrygian dominant again. I'm going to stick to the root to be C because here also we did the same. And then I'm going to change the octave. I'm just going to go a couple of octaves up. It generated these notes, but I want to change the pattern a little bit. So I was playing around with one pattern over here. I'm just going to copy that. And I'm going to paste it. And then if I hit play, yeah, so that's not so bad, right? Now let's just quickly check what this note length can do. So by default, it is a quarter note. I'm going to change it to half note. And now if I generate that and hit play, it has slowed it down. We can slow it down further. And we can by all means use patterns here as well. Yeah, needless to say, you can change the scale to be any of these scales, and you can change the root to be any of the roots, any of the notes. Same with the octave, you can change it to any of these octaves. And I'm going to just quickly show you what the Sizzle does. So if we open up this clip, you can see that it has the same velocity or the same volume for each of the notes. Each of the notes has the same volume. So if I set Sizzle to sine, what it's going to do is it's going to create a sine wave, and it is unipolar because I cannot set negative. I mean, it's no point setting negative values in these MIDI clips. What would happen is it would just be a zero volume. So it's like turning it off, if you will. So it is creating this shape like a sine wave, and it's unipolar, so it's looking like a double sine wave, kind of inverted sine wave. So this stuff, instead of going down, it's coming up again, and that's by design. Same thing you can do with, like, you can have a cosine shape, and the same principle applies again. All the negative values are converted to positive values, or a ramp up or a saw kind of a shape like this. And if you play that, it has its own little flavor because of the volumes being changed. Okay, maybe it's not so evident. Okay, so some of these instruments, they don't have that setting where it will accept a MIDI note to come in and give you its volume. It'll set its own volume. Having said that, this part is still work in progress, and I'm going to be adding more improvements to it as time goes by. But by all means, check it out. It's something to try out. So I think I have kind of covered most of these aspects. Actually, let me show you something before I go, right? So there was this article I had published some time back, and in here I had created this function, which kind of, this is the function, and then it takes a count parameter. If you don't give it the count, it takes it as 8, but basically it generates something like this. So this is like a pattern again, right? So let me copy that and paste it over here, and let's use that as the pattern. Okay, I'm going to change the scale just to, it'll sound completely off, but oh, this is affecting the bass. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I wonder if you understood what happened. I selected the bass channel and I kind of pasted it inside the bass channel of the Riff device. Hence, it affected the bass line. So maybe we can just check it out how it sounds. We'll mute this guy out for a moment and we'll see how it sounds. Yeah, it's not so bad, right? Anyway, I wanted to do that to the Riff channel, so let's do it over here again. I'll use the same pattern. Generate a scale, generate a rhythm, and unmute it. Yeah, so that's not so bad, right? I mean, the way this works is there's this function, right? So if I copy this function right now, okay, there we go. And then if I open the console of the browser, the console, you can open it in your whatever browser and just paste this in, and then grab this, paste it here again, put these two braces and hit enter. It'll generate a slightly different pattern, and if I keep generating, you can see that there is a slight variation across. And this variation or this style of pattern is governed by this code. So if you change this code to be something different, it will generate a different kind of pattern. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this feature available to the device itself. So I'll have some options here to select and generate those patterns as opposed to you having to type them out, like some interesting patterns kind of a thing. So let's take this pattern right now and then use it in our track. And let's see how that sounds. maybe reduce the note rate, the speed. Yeah. Okay, so I think I've covered more or less everything over here. Feel free to try it out and let me know what you think. Okay, that's it from me now. Bye bye. Have fun making music.